Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. In today's video, we are going to be previewing the upcoming season for the Indiana Pacers. However, before I get too far into it, I want to remind you all to leave a like and subscribe. I've been appreciating all the support that I've been receiving lately, and I hope to see that continue. I also want to remind you to follow me on Twitter. The link will be in the description. Without further ado, let's talk about the Pacers. However, before I think that we can adequately preview the upcoming season for the team, we have to discuss each transaction that the team made in the recently concluded offseason. However, with the Pacers, there's not too much to talk about. The best player this team added was Jalen LeCue, and the best player they lost was TJ Leaf. So yeah, not too much going on here. They took Cassius Stanley with the 54th pick, which is a pick that I liked quite a bit. I kind of thought that he was going to go higher than this, and there weren't too many players left on my personal big board that I would have preferred that they take over Stanley. Stanley wasn't in my top 46 of players that I think are going to be rotation pieces one day, but he was certainly on the border of making it onto that list, and because of his athletic ability, I think that one day we could see him at an NBA level. Not necessarily something I'd bet on, but it's not out of the realm of possibility by any stretch. They re-signed Justin Holliday to a 3-year, $18 million contract. I really liked this move for the Pacers. I had Holliday valued much closer to the mid-level. I thought there was a chance that maybe he could even get a little more than the mid-level for like a 2-year deal from some team. And the fact that they kept him on for just a fraction of the mid-level exception was a really nice move from the Pacers. I think that Holliday is really important to this team. He would be super impactful on whatever team he was on, and I'm a big fan of his. I would have really liked it if some teams like the Jazz or the Mavericks would have made a run at Justin Holliday, but he's still a Pacer, and he's certainly going to be an impactful player for this team. They also re-signed Jakar Sampson to a 1-year minimum contract. This move makes me a lot less excited. Jakar Sampson might be the single most whatever player in the entire NBA. They also traded TJ Leaf and a future second-round pick for Jalen LeCue. TJ Leaf wasn't working out in Indiana, and so they brought in another player with high potential that they are apparently going to take a shot on and hope that he can work out in LeCue. Now that we've talked about that offseason for the Pacers, I think that we're ready to preview the upcoming season for the squad. When I talk about this and go through this exercise of previewing the upcoming season, I like to talk about each player individually and what my expectations are for them for this season. And then at the end, I put it all together and make some predictions about the team and what they could look like this season. As always, we'll start at the point guard position where we have Malcolm Brogdon as the incumbent starter. There's certainly no real challenger for him at that role unless Aaron Holliday takes a huge jump. But Brogdon is a player that I really liked. As a Bucks fan, I was super happy with the contributions he brought to the team as a Buck. Obviously, it was painful that he could never stay healthy, but his defense at the point of attack, his ability to play both on the ball and off the ball, his good shooting, all of it just made him a super high-level role player with the Bucks. But I also can't fault him for leaving. A lot of people have really banged on the Bucks and said, "Come on, how would you let this guy leave?" But he clearly didn't want to play in Milwaukee, where he was the 4th or 5th option on the offensive end of the floor. So now he's in Indiana, where he's probably one of the 2 or 3 highest options. He gets to play with the ball in his hands a lot more. So I certainly understand the move from his perspective, but he's still that high-level role player as a super good defender at the point of attack, a very good playmaker on the offensive end. In his first season as a true lead guard for his team, we saw his playmaking numbers skyrocket, and his turnover numbers only took a slight increase. So that was a super nice sign. I think that he generally is going to be a solid option at the lead guard position moving forward. Definitely not someone that could be a lead guard on a championship team. Probably would have to be the 3rd or 4th best player on that type of team for them to really have a shot at making a run at a finals. But he is certainly a man capable of manning the point for a playoff team. I'm a big fan, and I think that he will probably be like a borderline all-star type player once again this season. Aaron Holliday is the next guy here. I am also a pretty big fan of Aaron Holliday. I think that the jump that he took as a three-point shooter, going from 33% in his rookie season to 39% in his sophomore year, gives a glimmer of hope that one day he could develop into being a starting point guard in the NBA because of that shooting ability, as well as his ability to break down defenses and get to the rim. When he does do that, though, he really needs to improve as a playmaker. Oftentimes, it seems like he forces up shots. We saw him get played off the court in the Eastern Conference playoffs last year, as he was a starter for the team initially, and by the end of the series wasn't even getting 10 minutes per game. But I'm a pretty big fan of Holliday. I think that he's a great defender at the point of attack, is terrific on the ball. It's another story off the ball where he struggles a bit, but with that, in conjunction with his high shooting capabilities and burst getting to the basket, I certainly see a spot here for Aaron Holliday. I think he'd probably be better off as a 2 because of the struggles he has as a playmaker, but he's only 6 foot, so that's certainly not something that will happen. So I think an ideal position, or an ideal spot for him to be, would be alongside someone like Giannis Antetokounmpo or Kawhi Leonard or LeBron James, where you have a high usage wing that can handle a lot of those playmaking duties, and Aaron Holliday can just focus on being a secondary ball handler and playmaker who's able to attack closeouts at a high level and knock down open three-pointers. Clearly, though, that player isn't here in Indiana. TJ Warren is a really nice wing, but he's certainly not on the same tier as the other guys that I talked about before. So I think that in order for Holliday to really reach his ceiling as a starting point guard in the NBA, he's probably going to have to find a new home. However, if he does stick around in Indiana as a long-term backup for Malcolm Brogdon, I still think that he has a chance to have a solid career, and because of his scoring ability on the offensive end, we could see him compete for a 6th Man of the Year one day, assuming he remains here in Indiana as the backup. The third player, really the third point guard on this team, as a part of this loaded point guard position for the Pacers, is TJ Mcconnell. Mcconnell is a high-level defensive player at the point of attack. He's a really good playmaker, has minuscule turnover percentages, and takes care of the ball really well. Is also a pretty good finisher at the rim for a guard. He's a good rebounder for a guard. Overall, there's a lot of things that TJ McConnell does really well. The thing that prevents him from really becoming a starter in the NBA is his lack of burst, as well as his lack of a jump shot. If he did have a jump shot, he'd probably be the ideal backup point guard type, but because he really can't shoot it, he doesn't really make all that big of an impact. However, because of his solid defense as well as good playmaking and good finishing at the rim, he grades out as a pretty average player who is certainly able to give you some good minutes off the bench. Now that we've gone over the point guards, we're ready to move on to the wings. We'll start with Victor Oladipo here. Oladipo is a player that I still really have a lot of hope for. I loved watching him play during his All-NBA season 3 years ago. Hard to believe that that was 2017-18. It seems like it was so much more recently than that, but he's struggled with injuries recently, and I still think that he is going to come back and be a very high-level player. I think I still have him ranked somewhere in like the top 30 or 35 in the league the last time I updated my player rankings. But Oladipo is a really high-level defensive player, terrific at creating opportunities for his team as a defensive playmaker, posts very high steal rates as well as very high block rates. He also is just terrific on the ball, is an absolute hound, and just does not allow opposing lead guards to do anything. He's not as good off the ball, but he still is a very high-level player. He's certainly not bad off the ball. He's just not as impactful. And on the offensive end, I am still a believer in Oladipo. He's a high-level finisher at the rim. He has a really good mid-range jumper. He's an okay three-point shooter. He was taking steps forward in his playmaking as we saw his Playmaking percentage take a huge spike right before his injury in the 2018-19 season. He had a career high assist percentage in that season. And really, that injury is just a bummer. I'm still a believer in Oladipo, though. I still think that he's going to bounce back and have a good year this year. And really, it's just fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. That might have not looked very good, but trust me, my fingers are crossed. Not a different hand gesture that it might have looked like I was making. But back to Oladipo. It's hard to know coming off of the injury, but I'm still willing to bet on him. And if he does come out and look really good, he's a player that I think could be on the move. Because if the Pacers are looking like a 7th seed or 8th seed, I think that there's a chance that this could be a team that looks to blow it up, kind of like the Oklahoma City Thunder just did. Maybe if you're a Pacers fan, you don't approve of that, but you could definitely get a lot of value from Victor Oladipo, a lot of value out of Miles Turner, a lot of value out of TJ Warren if he was someone you were interested in moving. And then you could start to trigger a rebuild around the young guys like Malcolm Brogdon, Domantas Sabonis, Goga Bitadze. And I get that the other guys that I talked about with them trading are like 26 to 28, but really I think that you can extract a lot of value from those players like Oladipo, Warren, Turner, and then you can focus on trying to generate a team that can contend for a championship in the future, because with the core they have right now, I just don't see that happening. Next guy to talk about here is TJ Warren, another guy that I just kind of threw out that I could see him getting traded, but he's also a player that if the Pacers do go down the blow it up route, I would have interest in hanging on to if I were Indiana. He's a very high-level offensive wing player. He's always been a super good finisher at the rim, and this past 2 seasons, we've seen him take a huge leap and become a 40% three-point shooter, which just makes him a lethal offensive option as a scorer. He doesn't bring much playmaking to the table, but you don't necessarily need to when you're as good of a scorer as TJ Warren is, as we saw when he dropped 50 points against the Philadelphia 76ers in the bubble. On the defensive end, we also saw Warren take a huge leap last season. It might have been the Nate McMillan effect, so who knows if he'll be able to retain the same level of defense under Nate Bjorkgren. But I am a pretty big believer in TJ Warren. I really liked what he brought last year, and I think that he's someone who could sneak into like the most improved player race if he averages between 23 and 25 points per game next year, which is probably not out of the question. Next guy here is Jeremy Lamb. I know that he is coming off of a major injury, a torn ACL, I believe. I'm not necessarily sure what the timetable is on his return. I didn't do too much research into that, which I probably should have. But when Lamb is healthy, he's a plus defender who can do a bit of duty as like a ball handler on the wing, like a secondary playmaker type. He's not a great shooter, 33% from the three-point line last season, and he isn't anything too special as a shot creator either, but with his plus defense and ability to do a bit of ball handling off the ball, he's still a really good role player and someone that is a nice option coming off the bench as a wing. So is Justin Holliday, the next guy. Like I said before, I'm a huge fan of Justin Holliday. He's a super high-level defensive player, posted block rates and steal rates above 2%. He's able to use his athleticism and length to his advantage, and that makes him a super impactful defensive player. We also saw him post a career-high 40% three-point shooting last year, so he's really established himself as a high-level 3-and-D wing in the NBA. He's not quite on the same tier as someone like Robert Covington or Danny Green, because he's nothing off of the dribble. I guess those two guys really aren't either. But Justin Holliday is like a player you're not comfortable taking more than 3 dribbles per possession. He's mostly just a spot-up guy who brings a lot of energy and athleticism on the defensive end of the floor, but that's still super valuable. I still think that his 3-year, $18 million contract was a bargain, and generally he's one of the role players that I really like best in the entire NBA. Next guy here is Doug McDermott, who is maybe a I was going to say a bit of an opposite of Justin Holliday, but Holliday is also a really good shooter, so you can't necessarily say that. But McDermott is a bit of a liability defensively. He's a poor athlete, and that really limits what he can do on the defensive side of the ball. But on offense, he's an elite sharpshooter, shoots it really well coming off of screens, pin downs, whatever it is, off of movement, off of the bounce. He's a really, really good shooter. The question with him more comes on defense, like I said before, but as long as he's providing somewhat adequate defensive effort, and he usually does, he's a smart team defender and he tries pretty hard on defense, that makes him certainly a viable rotation piece for a team, and I think that he had one of his best seasons of his whole career last year in Indiana. Last guy here is Keelan Martin. At Butler, I thought that he was an interesting player as a wing coming into the NBA, but I really don't know too much about him. I haven't seen much of him playing in general, so I'm just going to move on here. Not too much to say about Martin. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on this guy. Do you think he could develop into a rotational piece one day? Now that we've covered all the... Oh, no, Edmund Sumner. Can't gloss over him too much. Once again, a player I liked quite a bit in college at Xavier. Sumner is a good defensive player, is solid on the ball, and pretty good as a team defender as well. And on the offensive end, that's where he struggles a little bit. He's able to use his athleticism to get to the basket a fair amount, but his shooting hasn't really come along. He's a poor free throw shooter, a poor three-point shooter, and that really limits how good he can be. At one point, I thought that he would certainly grow into a rotational, wing/guard, but if the shooting's not there, then I don't necessarily see how this works out. Now, ready to move on to the big man position. We'll start with Domantas Sabonis. Sabonis made his first All-Star team last season, and he is a super entertaining player to watch on the offensive end of the floor. He's a great ball handler and really good playmaker for a big man. Does a terrific job as a rebounder as well. So those are really his three best skills, are passing, ball handling, and rebounding. And he's also a pretty good scorer as well. Really good in the mid-range and a high-level finisher at the basket. He's really grown during his time in the NBA, become a better guy at taking contact and finishing through it. His free throw rate has increased almost every year during his NBA tenure. And overall, I think that he still has a bit of room to grow as an offensive player, and he's become like a top 5 offensive big man in the entire NBA. Where the questions come are on defense. He's one of the worst rim protecting big men in the whole league, posted minuscule block rates last year, only 1.2%, which is, for a center, very, very underwhelming. One of the worst marks in the entire league. He can't really guard on the perimeter either, so I just don't really see where the fit for him is defensively, especially alongside a guy like Miles Turner. Obviously, Turner can cover up for his shot blocking deficiencies, but Sabonis can't really guard on the perimeter, so that puts him in a difficult position. That's really where this duo struggles. I get it a little bit more, where Turner can just kind of space the floor and allow Sabonis to do a lot of his work with the ball in his hands. But on the defensive end, Sabonis really can't play the 4, and I think that that's really where this team is going to have to figure out what they want to do. Generally, I think that Sabonis is a pretty significantly better player than Turner because of his ability as a playmaker on the offensive end of the floor. He does much more off the bounce than Turner ever has, and I think that covers up for his defensive lackings, we'll say. But Turner is a better three-point shooter, although he did take a pretty sharp decrease there, went from like a 38% shooter to a 34% shooter last year. If he's shooting it at a 38% mark, that makes him like a legit top 10 center in the NBA. But if he's not shooting it up there, then it really hurts him, and he becomes someone who's limited to being purely a rim protector, and he also took a step back. As a shot blocker last season, his block rate went from 8.4% to 6.9%, which is still a terrific block rate for a big man, but it's not the league leading shot blocker type that he was in 2018-19. Still, though, both of these guys are high-level big men. Both of them are probably top 12-ish centers in Turner's case, and like a top 6 to 8 center in Sabonis's case. He's right up there with guys like Brook Lopez, Nikola Vucevic, Yusuf Nurkic in the conversation for being, the next best big man behind like the top 5: Embiid, Towns, Jokic, Gobert, and Adebayo, in no particular order. I think those are clearly the 5 best centers, and you could debate that Sabonis is the 6th best, but I just don't see the fit with these two moving forward. It would appear that Miles Turner doesn't have a whole lot of trade value around the league, so maybe Sabonis is the guy that they end up moving on from. I don't want to speculate too much. I don't really know what's going on in the Pacers front office, obviously. I'm a kid who sits in his basement. But I think Sabonis is the better player and the younger player as well, so he's the guy that the Pacers should look to keep around. I don't see this pairing working out long term, like I said before, so if they have to move one of them, Turner's probably the guy for me. And maybe even a better reason to move on from him is that I really, really like the guy who's currently the 3rd string center on this team in Goga Bitadze. I am a huge Goga fan. I liked him coming into the draft. I think he won like the MVP of whatever European league he was playing in prior to declaring for the draft. And I thought that he was a pretty nice pick for the Pacers at 18, even if it created a bit of a logjam for them at the big man position. If his three-point shooting can jump back to where it was, the Adriatic League, that's the league he was in prior to coming over, but if he can get back to being the three-point shooter that he was overseas, instead of being the 8 for 42 shooter that he was in the NBA this past season, I'm pretty sure that was his numbers, then I think that Goga Bitadze has a pretty high ceiling in the NBA as like a really good rim protector who is super dangerous in the two-man game as someone who can either roll to the rim and finish, has a bit of an ability as a playmaker out of the short roll, especially if he continues to play under Domantas Sabonis, because Sabonis is one of the best short roll players in the entire NBA, and if Bitadze can learn a thing or two from him, that could certainly help his development. And the third part of Goga's scoring ability is as a three-point shooter. On the defensive end, he's a really high-level rim protector, blocked, I think, like 7% of... he had like a 7% block rate last season, which is super high. I like this guy quite a bit, and I hope that the Pacers are able to free up more minutes for him with the big club next year, instead of like the 4 minutes per game or whatever it was that he was relegated to last year. Jakar Sampson is the last guy here, and like I said before, he's super underwhelming. He has almost no skill offensively. He's a decent finisher at the rim, but outside of that, you're not getting a whole lot of production from Jakar. On defense, though, he's a really fun player because he gives all the effort in the world. He plays super hard, is a solid rim protector, although he really isn't necessarily a center since he's only 6'7", but just an effort guy who doesn't bring much offensively but is pretty good defensively because of how hard he plays. Overall with this team, I just don't know what to think because I could see it where Victor Oladipo gets back to his prime self. We see big improvements from the young guys off the bench like Holliday and Bitadze. Maybe Edmund Sumner or Jalen LeCue ends up working out, but I kind of doubt that'll happen. But I could also see it where they blow it up and trade away 3 of their 5 starters, and then we say, well, this team isn't any good anymore. Are they even going to make the play-in game? So making a prediction for this team is kind of tough, but I would say that they'll probably end up somewhere between those two extremes. I think that a best-case scenario for this team would be like a 45-20 season where they're like a top 5 seed in the Eastern Conference, and a worst-case scenario would be Victor Oladipo looks horrible, and the Miles Turner and Domantas Sabonis don't work out at all in the front court, and T.J. Warren falls back to being a poor defensive player and his three-pointers stop going in. I could see this team being something more like a 33-39 or 32-40 type team. So I think we'll split the difference and say that if I were predicting a win-loss record for this team, it would probably be somewhere between 35 and 40 wins. So 35 and 37 at worst, but 40 and 32 at best. I guess I'd probably lean more towards the back of that. I don't think that this team can win a playoff series as currently constructed in the Eastern Conference as is, which has gotten much stronger in recent years. I don't think that they're going to be one of the top 6 seeds in the Eastern Conference, which would leave them playing in the play-in tournament, which is certainly a bit scary. I'm not sure if they're better than a team like Washington or a team like Atlanta. So yeah, I have a lot of questions about the Pacers. I think that they needed to shake it up a little bit, and they just didn't. They're running it back completely, and I'm not really sure that that is the optimal situation for this team. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you were, I think Kevin Pritchard is like the president of basketball operations for the Pacers. If you were Kevin Pritchard, what would you do with this team? Would you hang on to the stars, or would you trade them all away? Let me know in the comments. Leave a like and subscribe if you have been enjoying these videos. Follow my Twitter, like I said before. I'm going to start tweeting much more frequently now that the season is starting, so I think that certainly could be worth a bit of your time. Yeah, I think I've covered just about everything now. Pacers, weird team. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you all again very soon.